Hello, Alex. Good to see you again. How are you doing?
Hello, Ian. I'm fine. You?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. So, Alex, you run Bristol Groundschool, which is a theoretical knowledge training provider for people taking their ATPLs. But this little video is about the bigger subject. A lot of people coming into professional flight training want a kind of bigger overview. And I think it's fair to say that you've never been shy in making your views known. And while your views don't necessarily align with every single training provider out there, you've been known over the years for speaking your mind, should we say?
What are you saying?
So let's just rattle through some questions that are kind of general questions for the whole thing. Here we're talking about ab initio, if you like, to CPLIR. We're not talking just about any particular part of it. So first question, how much does it cost?
Well, the answer to that, of course, is it depends. So the absolute cheapest routes that you can take, which might not be for everybody, you can spend less than £40,000 doing the whole thing. A typical spend from somebody doing the modular route would probably be in the order of 50,000, something like that, maybe a little bit more, a bit less, depending on the choices that they make. And there are other routes available. You can do what's called a multi-pilot license, or you can do an integrated course, and those can cost up to 120,000. So the short answer to your question is realistically between about 50 and 120,000 pounds, depending on the routes you take.
And how long is that going to take you to spend that money?
Depends on the routes you take. The course that I've referred to as integrated and the multi-pilot's license courses are courses where you go to one particular flight school and they give you a set of sunglasses and a nice uniform with stripes on it, and they take you from ab initio right the way through to getting your license, and it's all carefully structured and programmed to get you through in a relatively short time. And in this context, a relatively short time is somewhere between 15 and 18 months. It's very unusual to do it less than that, because even if you're going at it full chat, you need the time to do the flying, you need the time to do the ground school and stuff like that. Sometimes those courses extend. Undoubtedly the people who've been studying in the last year will have their training will have to have dragged out, so it might take them a couple of years or so to do, but that's exceptional circumstances. The other path is to do what we call a modular training, where the customer chooses specialist schools for each particular phase of their training. And each phase is a module. So the first module, for instance, would be a private pilot's license. The second module would be ATPL theory. And then you do modules for the commercial skills test and modules for the instrument rating. And the advantage of that system, apart from cost, is that you can do it while you're working. You can fit it around your everyday life. So people who take that path, people who take that path tend to deliberately spread it out over a longer period, which is typically a minimum of 2 years, typically, but up to 4 or 5 years, depending on how their life is working out.
Okay, so I'm getting the trend of it depends coming along at the moment, which is interesting. Now, bearing in mind that your business is providing training, one of the training modules, the ground school, what do you say to people who come to you and go, should I go integrated or should I go modular?
Well, that's not all our business. And we do sell directly to customers doing modular ground school, but we also provide training material to quite a large number of schools throughout Europe, including many integrated schools. And I don't have a clear answer for you. The answer would depend on the individual circumstances. The integrated path is attractive because all the management of the course is done for you. You don't have to think about what's a good place to go. You don't have to do your own scheduling. You don't have to do your own planning. You don't have to take your own, well, there's an element of risk because there are some fairly dodgy flight schools out there as well. So you don't have to take the risk every time you make a choice. And it's ideally suited to somebody who's not working, who's perhaps come just straight out of school or perhaps straight out of university, and they have the funds to do it. And you can see the advantage to that, particularly when you compare it to the costs of sending someone to university. It's not a million miles away from the cost of an integrated course. So that would be a particular path. On the other hand, most of my customers are are older. They've been out in the world. They've been working. They've had jobs. They have partners. They quite often are married and have children, and it's not appropriate for them to take 18 months off and go and do a complete course away from their family, away from their life. They try to work at the same time. So that exercise is going to take longer. So it depends very much on the circumstances, that in many cases, modular is the right path. So integrated is a short, ideally a snappy course. You don't have to think about it at all. They take you from beginning to end, but they charge you for it. Modular course is going to be longer. It's up to you to plan your course, but you are able to fit it around your work and your life, and it's likely to be much cheaper as well.
Okay. How do people choose a school? Any tips?
How do people choose a school? How should people choose a school? How do people choose a school? How do people choose a school? Unfortunately, is they often just get overtaken by marketing, and that there's a lot of glossy marketing out there. The advantage of modular is that we get people who already started flying because they want to fly. So they will have gone down to the local aerodrome, they'll have started doing their private pilot's license, and probably it will have occurred to them as they were doing their license that they're really enjoying this, and why don't they go for this commercially? And they'll be changing careers sort of midlife. And that means that they're already in the flying system. So they tend to ask people, they might ask their instructor and say, John, I'm thinking of doing this commercially, how would I go about it? And then that you get quite valuable feedback, because the instructor is unlikely to have any skin in the game. And he's going to give, or she is going to give, relatively honest answers. Once you get beyond that and start to go out onto the internet, into social media, if you're intelligent, you can filter out the glossy marketing from honest recommendations. So how do people choose? Often they just get whacked by marketing. How should they choose? They should ask widely and take advice from people that don't have a commercial interest in the answer.
From one of your earlier answers, it's going to take between a year and 5 years to get your license and be employable. Given that the drive for this is to get a job, people aren't hiring very much at the moment. When should people start training to plan their careers?
Well, the answer is always with hindsight, that if you manage to arrive fully trained at a time when the hiring market booms, you've made some good choices, but you probably haven't made any informed choices. They're just chance. So it's very difficult to say you should train now or you shouldn't train now, because whatever you're doing, you're looking forward at least a year in the future. If you're asking me, is this a good time to start training now? Again, my answer would be it depends. If you're planning to emerge on the job market in a year's time, I think that you should perhaps give that a little bit of thought, because the aviation industry at the moment has been on its knees for the last year. And although there's lots of forecasts saying, it's going to expand, and hiring thousands of people and all the old pilots have retired, they're just guesses. They have no real idea. And if you'd asked people 6 months ago, they would have said, it'll take off in the summer. And now it doesn't look like it will. So predicting to come out as an employable candidate in a year's time, to me, seems a little bit chancy. If you're going 2, 3, 4 years' time, then to me, the risk is less, but you're moving further into the unknown. How could I put this? Certainly, the best time to start training is probably not when recruitment is at its peak. Let's put it that way, because there's always cyclical. And if it's absolutely at a peak, although everyone says, it's going to continue for tens of years, it goes up and down with the economic cycle.
The answer to many of the professional flight training questions are, it depends. And really, you need to do your research carefully, widely, and maybe have yourself a little plan A, B, and C along the way as well.
I would definitely agree with that. And I used to do presentations for some of the flight schools in the UK. And the cornerstone of that was, if somebody starts showing you adverts with pilots with uniforms on and sunglasses, all looking up at the sky like that just walk away, because they're trying to sell you a concept, a dream, which is inevitably going to be overpriced. And if you take a more mature look at this, you'll find that there are better ways of doing this. Higher quality training in many cases. There used to be an argument that the integrated schools said, oh, well, with best quality training and stuff, but it's just not borne out by the facts. And if you go onto the social media and look at the presentations from people like Ryanair, for instance, they are absolutely clear that as far as they can see, there is no difference in quality of output generally across Europe between integrated schools generally and modular schools generally. They say sometimes our best candidate is an integrated one, sometimes our best candidate is a modular one. There's no quality difference. Huge quality difference from school to school. I mean, you can get some very poor schools out there and some very good schools out there, but not from path to path.
To sum up, again, it depends. Do your research.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time, Alex. I look forward to seeing you again at some stage in the future.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much, Ian.
Thanks very much for watching. As ever, please leave a comment, like the video, and if you haven't already, do subscribe to our channel for all the latest general aviation news.